But in those new plans, is there a specific attention paid to the smaller and the medium-sized cities?
Yeah, I think sure, all cities are important, cities, and I would even say towns. And probably the bigger cities are those that can more easily manage without support and without this kind of, shall we say, cooperation that we can put together through initiatives like the EIP. So I think, yes, we do have a special attention also on smaller cities. And I think the idea about having the main cities, like, for example, in the project I just mentioned, where you have, I think, Rotterdam and Glasgow and one more, which I forget which is now. And then you have smaller cities that are following this, is a really good idea, because that's where we can exchange experiences. And of course, smaller cities sometimes have different issues as well, but maybe also we could think about having special things where smaller cities work more closely together among them without necessarily following bigger cities within the project. So I think that's something that we are all looking at. The one thing I didn't mention at all is, and I think that point was made also by one of the other panelists in the introduction, is that we're talking about smart cities, but we should also actually talk about climate neutral cities. Very, very important. And this concept is exactly reflected in the new Horizon Europe mission that is currently being drawn up as well, because that has exactly that title, Smart and Climate Neutral Cities. That will be very important. And there, the idea is to, of course, look at big cities, but also at medium-sized cities that can also have a very important role to play.
Thank you very much for highlighting that. And actually, that's a quite nice transition to one of the, let's say, fellow cities in those projects. So we're moving over to our colleagues in Brno and to Mr. Ladik. So as a city representative and being at the forefront of course, a lot of the impact that COVID-19 has caused, what's your experience until now, and also in the light of your smart city plans?
Thank you for the question. What I have to say first, we totally don't have a crisis plan, but a state level. Yeah, and for us, a municipality representative, is very difficult to do something when the governments don't have a concrete plan, because we totally don't have not only the crisis plan, but we totally don't have a law, not only the state law, but during the whole union, the law, because we have the open market, and in one day we close the border and we stop the connecting between the people, the states, the region, the cities, and so on. But if I answer the concrete question, our experience is that we totally don't have the enough capacity for the testing people. So we have to have enough capacity for the testing. We have to protect especially the old people and people who are employed in social sector and healthy sector. And one good point, we built a based hospital here in trade fairs. We were prepared to the new hospital, but it cannot be. We don't start it, but we were prepared to do this. And what I think was very positive was the volunteers. The cooperation between the university students, normally citizens, people, employers, whole of companies, especially the big companies, was very perfect, and this tool and this base can be used for the future also.
And have you already started thinking about how you would take those lessons that you obviously learned during the last couple of months, how you could take that forward into the implementation or planning of your smart city actions? Also, because we were saying actually cooperation is one of the biggest challenges and opportunities, and you just mentioned that the crisis has shown quite a lot of that cooperation.
But as I mentioned first, by the law, in the crisis, the first is state, then region, and then the city. So we don't have so strong power to do some things by the cities itself. But especially in the biggest cities, as my colleague mentioned previously, it's I would say it's very important to have the tools and possibility to do something, to do some results very quickly.
Okay, thank you very much. And maybe that's a good connection to Karen. Karen, you earlier said that it's important to have policies that actually solve the problems cities are facing. So what is your take on the COVID-19 impact and how the policies might need to address that better and help cities like the city of Brno do that job?
Well, first of all, of course, there was no roadmap that cities could turn to when we look at this crisis. There was no, it was an unprecedented situation. I think there is an echo. I don't know, maybe because the sound in Brno is still on. Could that be? Okay. So more than ever, peer-to-peer exchange and cooperation between cities is also important so that they can learn from each other and look at the different solutions that were being implemented. And looking at the experiences in the mobility sector in particular, we have been taking stock of them with our network, so we could also share them afterwards between the cities. And we can distinguish different phases, let's say. There was the lockdown phase at first, where we saw that, of course, this crisis is being tackled very much in our hospitals, but it's also being tackled on our streets, on our plazas, our trains, buses, and trams. And our cities really stepped into the front lines to make sure that those who still needed to move around were provided with the essential mobility services. And I think that was already quite impressive, how cities made sure that that could happen, that public transport was available to those who needed it, or alternatives were put in place if public transport could not deliver. But then even more important, of course, was the post-lockdown period. As we were going out of the confinement phase, how did we have to deal with the new reality? And if anything became clear during the lockdown at first, but also afterwards, was how unfair the allocation of space is in our cities. We saw during the lockdown, when people were not allowed to move around, if not essential, the big wide car lanes that were empty. And then you had citizens still moving around to remain physically active through walking and cycling on narrow pavements, on narrow bike lanes, if there were any bike lanes at all. So a very good thing that is coming out of this crisis is the massive reallocation of space. First, because of a temporary measure, because of a temporary new criterion or requirement that we never had to deal with before, which is physical distancing. But also actually to set the bill straight and to do something which was very long overdue already, and that is give more space to cyclists and pedestrians in our cities. We saw pop-up bike lanes, emergency bike lanes called by others. We saw pop-up bus lanes as well to give at least that benefit to the public transport sector, which is severely suffering in the current context. We saw residential zones, reduced speed limits. So we saw actually an acceleration of a trend that had already started prior to COVID-19, and that is to give the streets back to the people in our urban environment, to have less cars in our city streets and more walking and cycling. And now this is also finally being translated into more space for these sustainable modes. And what we now have to do as a third step, let's say, lockdown, post-lockdown, and longer term, is make sure that these temporary measures at first become permanent. And when we look at what the different cities are doing, we see that those cities that are particularly doing well in the current context are also cities which have very good sustainable urban mobility plans in place, which is a tool that is also being extensively promoted by the European Commission, and help cities to develop a long-term and integrated vision for sustainable mobility, looking at different packages of measures that can be introduced to reach those policy goals. And what happened in many cases is that measures that were planned as part of those SUMPs already for the years to come have now been accelerated, have been put on a fast track, and have been introduced not in a couple of years' time, but in a couple of weeks or months' time, such as, for example, introducing wide cycling routes or extensive cycling routes along the network, or redesigning city squares to improve urban living and moving around, but also repurposing parking space, for example, and using it for other purposes than parking cars in our city centers. So I think that's a very good development. And the fact that we are talking about measures that were planned anyway in those SUMP contexts, of course, increases the likelihood of temporary measures to become permanent over time. And then the final thing I would like to mention when it comes to experiences and lessons learned is to learn from this crisis and to bounce back from this crisis, and to help our cities to become more resilient for the future and better prepared in the future, if hopefully not, but if we run into another pandemic or if we run into another emergency, that there will be a roadmap this time and that there will be a recipe that they can turn to. And this is what we need to do to make sure that we don't waste this crisis, let's say, but learn from it.
Learn from experience. Thank you, Karen, for that statement as well. Going on to Mr. Piontek, and also relating it to something that Mr. Steen had said. Obviously, there's a lot of money being talked about these days. I think in figures that are quite abstract to most of us. But it is, of course, also these funds provide a unique opportunity in terms of investment in smart city projects and infrastructure, of course. But in order for that to be meaningful and impactful, how do you see, how would you use this opportunity, especially looking also, as I said, maybe at the cities that are so far maybe not really on board with that? So how could you use this opportunity to reach and invest in cities that are maybe smaller or medium in size?
Yeah, as the money is there, it's now up to the cities to use it. And the COVID crisis or situation showed how many things don't work properly in the cities. We spend now more and more time in the buildings. We're working from home. So the quality of the buildings, it's becoming more and more important. And there is huge potential in the building stock, especially in the cities. And it is not only the big cities, but also the small cities and medium-sized cities, which have the huge potential to reduce the carbon emissions coming from the building stock. As I mentioned, the money is available, but it's important to have investments which are very well prepared. The COVID situation showed or pushed for temporary measures, but we are looking for sustainable investments that will have long-lasting impact. And there has been mentioned buildings that are now, they will exist for many years in the future. And it's important that these buildings are in very good shapes, that the energy performance of the buildings is very low. And I think the crisis showed it, and the Commission is pushing for it to invest in renovation of the buildings. As a bank, we support different types of investments in small and medium-sized cities. We work with financial intermediaries which can support the investments prepared by the cities to finance them. We also work directly with medium-sized cities through framework loans, where we finance not only investments in energy efficiency in buildings, but also in urban mobility, sustainable urban mobility, or digitalization. So there are different ways and possibilities how we can finance the upcoming investments. But one important aspect is that most of the investments, they have to be prepared in very good quality. And the Commission has a tool especially for investments, preparation of investment in energy efficiency, but also in sustainable urban mobility. And it's ELENA Technical Assistance. And this tool, this technical assistance, offers a very good way how investments in energy efficiency, in building stock, in district heating, in smart cities, infrastructure, but also sustainable urban mobility can be developed. Cities can come there together. They can join together the program under regional, for example, authority, or if they can also private institution like housing association, they can move together and work together, share their experience, and work on improving their building stock quality. I think also the cooperation between different public and private institutions within the city under the ELENA program is very important, where one active player is taking the leading role and supports the development or investments in different for different stakeholders. And I think a very good example of this such cooperation is from the city of Leuven in Belgium, where a program proposed by Leuven 2030 gathered stakeholders from the city, public and private, and they work very well together to implement different investment in energy efficiency, mainly in a building. So I think the COVID crisis show many aspects which are not working properly now, but now we have the opportunity to move forward, to tackle these issues, and to make the proper investments to bring sustainability and climate neutrality to our cities.
Thank you. And maybe a very short follow-up question with the request to also answer quite shortly. What's the role of the marketplaces matchmaking facility then and also bringing this investments maybe to the level that they need to be?
As I mentioned, especially the small cities, maybe they cannot do the investment on their own, or they do not have the experience to how to prepare the investments, how to tackle certain issues. And this marketplace offers them opportunity to meet with other cities, with other participants, with people that have experience how such things can be prepared, how such investment can be prepared. So it's important to make networking, to come to meet different people, exchange ideas, and to work together on preparation of the investments, and then come forward with the proposal, try to find the proper investors, try to figure out how the ideas can be implemented, and so on. So I think networking events or the marketplace matchmaking facility is very important too.
Thank you very much. And it's not the easiest words to say next to each other. Thank you. To come to our fifth panelist, Dr. Romano Jordan, you already mentioned that the mission board has set quite some ambitious targets. And if I'm not mistaken, it is to have 100 climate neutral cities by 2030. But looking at what you heard maybe already, How do you think these insights could help support reaching this goal, this very ambitious goal? You're muted. You need to unmute yourself. No, you're still muted. It doesn't show. Yeah, you're back.
Oh, okay. Oh, excuse me. Thank you. Thank you for this question. Yes, it's a very ambitious goal. Like I mentioned before, it's not about I don't know, a chain of projects, but is about systemic transformation towards climate neutrality. And we see the cities which will enter the process will be a kind of experimentation and innovation hub for all cities to promote this process and then also to cooperate with other cities. There is a direct goal till year 2030 and also, I would say, implicit goal till year 2050, and the process split in 3 phases. The first 2, in my opinion, being the hardest one because they include, of course, very important part like strategy and action plan design and citizens engagement. Some of the cities do not have experiences in this field, as is demanded, as would be demanded if we have ambition of climate neutralization. Then also, of course, capacity building. Also organization of cities and their organizational hierarchy. We noticed, we as an institute noticed these problems already now when we were trying to answer to this special COVID-19 crisis. What we also noticed, for example, and it's also very important for the mission, is digitalization, which is not only about the skills, but it's also about the organization. I mean, operational processes, how they are designed. So it is really transformation of the city to follow the decarbonization path. What would be my let's say feedback on what was said? I was following very carefully what was said.
Ms. Jordan, just before you continue, something seems to be covering your microphone. So we heard you very clearly in the beginning, but somehow there are some. Try it again.
I mean, I didn't do nothing, but
yeah, this is better.
Okay. Okay. So for the I do agree, and it was discussed also at the mission board that we have to find first to identify what are the low-hanging fruits, and obviously these are initiatives in the energy efficiency and especially in buildings, but of course this also means big investments. Then also importance of initiatives which support designing of ecosystem, which is yours initiatives. EIP is certainly one of them. Later on, I can mention also some others, which I hope will play important role in the mission, but it depends on them. Then first mayor of Brno mentioned different supporting environments in member states. This is also very important, and it is important that these initiatives which are designed do respect these differences of which cities face. Then smaller, bigger cities were mentioned, also less or better prepared cities. I mean, the processes and initiatives which will be designed should be really flexible to treat all the differences of the cities. Then financing. For the mission, it is very important that we are aware. I mean, the idea for the missions is sit in the Horizon Europe program, but Horizon Europe is only it's about research and innovation projects, and it's about competition among best European research and innovation groups. But this is not enough. It's not enough money. So we have to, we have to find a way to somehow, I don't know, reserve, or what would be the right word, or that we, let's say some percent, 10% of European money could be spent by European cities in their path towards decarbonization. Then Horizon Europe, as I mentioned, is program which is a program based on competition of the best groups. I would see decarbonization process more as cooperation than competition. So it's also flexibility this type. Then what else do I have? Then also, of course, importance of, Mr. Pointek said that money is there. It's only on cities to use it. Yeah, but this will now be, I would say, a different kind of approach for cities, where investors should see the whole picture, not just separate projects. So how should they communicate and also design their financial plans and investment plans, so that they could really achieve not the target, which is for one project to be successful, but the target is decarbonization. So a lot of different challenges, which have to be solved in cooperation with cities. And you asked me about my opinion, what I think, based on the speeches now. I think that there is a very big awareness in the European Union that we have to cooperate more and enable cities, respect cities and their role of initiative, and then support them actually to lead the decarbonization path.
Thank you very much, and also thank you for bringing these different aspects together. As the next thing, we've heard quite a lot about what our panelists think are priorities and things to take action on, but we would also like to hear from you as the audience. So we will launch a poll question. It should be opening with you in the window. Also asking our audience in Brno, if you have a mobile device that has the browser or the app installed, you can partake in this poll as well if you want. For those of you joining virtually, that's relatively easy because it will open on your screen, and you just need to choose the poll option that you find resonates most with you. So I will now open the poll. You might need to scroll a little bit to see it, because you will also still see the speakers. So just scroll through and select the answer option that resonates most with you. I will give it another 20 seconds also for everybody to read all of the answer options and then make a choice. Okay. Another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and I'll close the poll. And I will hopefully be able to show you the results in 1 second. There you should be seeing them. Somebody could nod that you see it, because I don't see them. No, you don't. You don't see them? No. It should be shared with the audience. Anyway, then I'll tell you, because it's very simple results, because there are actually 100% of the participants that answered the poll chose the first option. that this is a great opportunity, getting rid of bad habits and practices of the past and apply what we learned during the crisis. It is, of course, the most positive of the answer options that they were there, but and also maybe in this group of people, it was a little bit predictable that might be the outcome. But nevertheless, it sets the scene as well for the future sessions and the next day that we still have together, because we want to learn. We want to learn from each other, learn from experience. Also, as Karen said, not do the same mistakes again. And we learned that cooperation is a good option to do that. It actually is probably the best option to do that. So we want to use that opportunity. Before we do a little closing round with our panelists, I'm wondering if there are questions from the audience. We want to try this, and this is of course also a technical thing that we will see if that works. So if you do have a question, you do have on your left side menu, as a participant, you have the chance to request for broadcast. There's a little icon, only participants have that. Speakers, don't look for it, you don't have it. But the audience has that little icon and you can click on it, because that gives you the chance to speak once we see that you want that. So if anybody in the audience would like to ask a question to our panelists, click that little button, the little person waving, and we will know that you want to say something and we can give the floor to you. So anybody that has a question, this is your moment to ask it. Later on, we might also try the conversation button, but we would like to actually test also if that works speaking. So anybody having a question? I don't see that, and I'm just checking with our technical team if there's anybody raising their hand, and maybe I don't see it. That could very well be. Could I get a sign if there's anybody raising their hands? I don't see that. So anybody maybe, yeah, I see a reaction. No, not yet. Okay, but that's fine. I think also everybody still has to find a way in this setup. So maybe then we just use the time for the last round that we have. So looking at the answers of the poll, there seems to be a lot of spirit, a lot of a lot of spirit in the group for transition and for learning. I see there is one question. Let's just see and try to pose this. A question to all panelists. So whoever wants to take it, please give me a sign. The question is, during the COVID-19 crisis, many mayors in Italy tried to implement e-commerce proximity services. What's your opinion about that? Did you hear about these things before? So anybody e-commerce proximity services and experiences with that wants to take this question? No, not yet. Oh yes, Karen, please go for it.
From a mobility perspective, but also from an urban perspective as a whole, e-commerce has been a trend that's been booming already prior to the crisis, but has seen an incredible explosion during this crisis. And what is important, and what we have also been discussing within the context of our urban freight and city logistics activities, is that there is a local link indeed. Due to the COVID restrictions, we could not shop as we were used to, and people massively turned to e-commerce. But this can have a tremendous impact on local retail and on the livelihood of our urban environments. And that's why it's important that indeed local authorities take initiatives where they support the local retail, local commerce, with introducing these e-commerce services as well, so that you always have a link between the physical shop that is present in a city and online services linked to that can hopefully also compete with the big players like Amazon and similar services. Because if all shopping goes to those big players, this of course can have a massive impact on our local economy. And indeed, I think it's very important, therefore, that our local authorities support their local commerce in going through this online transformation as well, and move to a new kind of hybrid solution where you have the local anchor, the shop, but also have an online version of it when needed or when people want to make use of it. Because what I'm already seeing happening in my city here, and then we're still talking about one of the best cities in Flanders. I'm based in Leuven, which was mentioned earlier, is that many shops have been closing down. Of course, there's a severe economic impact of this crisis as well. And the prices of housing that are not going down in the same way versus the economic challenges that are being faced. So I think it's important that we have such active support measures to avoid all shops leaving our city streets, which would take a very lively dimension of urban living away. So I would be all for such initiatives which support local e-commerce initiatives.
Thank you, Karen, for answering that. And yes, we also have Mr. Ladik wanting to respond to that question. Please.
The mayors, yeah. The mayors are the first guy or ladies who citizens trust and to think that they support all things, especially in services and in economics aspects also. And what I want to say, and from Brno experience, we try to and COVID just start quickly to do these things. We have, it's called Brno ID platform. That's a platform that people can pay for the different things like tickets, public transport, the waste fee, and so on. And we use also this tool for the communication with the citizens, especially in concrete questions. What we can do these things and what we can do these things. And I think it's very important to have the concrete municipality tools with the quick communication between each citizens and the municipality representatives.
Thank you very much for that intervention. And actually, it's a nice transition to our final round of points coming from the panelists before we close the session. As you know from the program, the next session will look into, the next plenary session will look into practical implementation experiences in cities. And we've just learned from the poll that the vast majority of today's participants is seeing COVID-19 as an opportunity to learn and to change things how they are done at the moment. So my question to you as panelists, what is your take on that? What would be these opportunities, especially looking at practical implementation? So what would be the things to tackle there? I would love to start in reverse order this time. And I would also like to ask you for a quick intervention so that we can give everybody a bit of time to respond. So Ms. Jordan, please.
So your question is, what would be my takeaway from this, from the messages we get today from participants?
No, it's in the direction of like, okay, apparently, yeah. Apparently, the majority of us in this room, virtual room, see COVID-19 as an opportunity to change things and to change the habits that we currently have and look at that. So, what would be your way in terms of implementing? Where do you think that needs to start?
Well, for me, it's very important that we don't have only support by cities and citizens, but that all institutions or all different organizations which are important to support the cities in their way are aware, and that we all actually follow the same goal. And for this, it was of crucial importance, of course, to define at the beginning of the new commission that what is our final goal is to go towards climate neutrality. I mean, I had quite a lot of intensive conversations with high-level people of cities, and they face different challenges. Of course, front-runner cities facing financial challenges. Where do they get for all? Where do they get the financial means to fulfill their strategies? But there are cities which even don't have enough knowledge, which don't have enough capacities. So what I would like to stress here is that we really give all of them, cities in which in all the spectrum of cities, the support and supportive environment, and that also in parallel to their efforts, we build also this ecosystem which is supporting them. And this is, I would say, the main opportunity for the cities at the moment, because we were mentioned several initiatives, several programs which will go on and which are actually realizing to build this ecosystem to support cities. This is the main opportunity in my understanding.
Thank you very much. So the question to Mr. Piontek: what is your main opportunity for implementing in the next coming years?
I think one important aspect has been mentioned just by the previous speaker, by Professor Jordan, that a lot of the cities do not have the capacity to prepare for the changes to come, so to prepare the right investments. And here I would like to point once again to the technical assistance of Elena, which provides the city with the opportunity to give the cities the capacity to prepare such investments and prepare in a really professional manner so that the investments can be then realized in a successful way. And I think all the investments which are going to happen should be prepared in an integrated way. So not only looking on one sector, but in a multi-sectoral way. An inclusive way, it means to take into account of the opinion of different stakeholders involved in, and in an innovative way. So it's not a standards measures that should be implemented, but we're looking for new innovative approaches that accelerate the investments, implementation of the investments. So I think all these aspects can be now tackled on, and hopefully good investments will come up.
Great, thank you, and also for highlighting Elena again. There will be a presentation on that later in a parallel session, so we'll hear more about this facility.
Yes.
Mr. Clausen, what's in your eyes the biggest opportunity moving ahead?
I think there are a couple of triggers that we can really make use of in the current context. First of all, we should not forget about the citizens. Let's not lose them along the way when we are making our plans. And there I see two major opportunities. First, that the behavioral change experts always tell us that you can change deeply rooted habitual behavior, such as mobility behavior, when there are major life changes. And I think COVID-19 could be just a major life-changing moment. Usually we're talking about getting married, having babies, changing jobs, which are nicer things, but people were forced to temporarily change their behavior. Let's capitalize on this and change habits which are deeply rooted, but had to change temporarily and make that permanent. And the second trigger I see when it comes to citizens is we know that we can more easily win the hearts and minds of people for measures that they might initially be opposed to if we let them experience those measures. And that's what we are actually doing. We are right now in a huge street experiment from a mobility perspective. We are playing in a huge sandbox. We are trialing out measures in real life. People can feel how it's like to live in a city with more space for pedestrians and cyclists, for example. And that will make it easier to also convince them of keeping these measures over the longer term. And to take political decisions which are usually very sensitive, such as removing space away from the private car. So that's when it comes to the citizens. The second thing I would like to highlight is the need for public-private partnerships, because we need to join forces, that I mentioned earlier, to bring innovations to our cities to tackle the challenges we are facing, but also we need new business models to fund those innovations. And also the private sector is being hit hard in the current context. And then finally, I would like to mention the need for different levels of governance to cooperate and also to empower our cities. Because sometimes we feel even on the local level, we are being held back by the national level, and we feel more supported by Europe in our push for innovation and transformation. And I also would like to call out to Europe to help us also sometimes convince our member states for the need for innovation to be put forward and to be pushed forward. So those three elements are, I think, instrumental and also are very important in making sure that we go beyond and don't get stuck in the piloting phase, but that we can come to a long-term rollout of innovation and a full integration of these new solutions in local policies, and not that when the funding of a project stops, the pilot stops and we don't have a legacy afterwards. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Karen. And then Mr. Ladik, also as Karen has just talked about the difficulties and governance levels and empowering the cities. What do you see as the main opportunity to be taken out of this crisis?
Main opportunity. I think the cities have to change the communication and cooperation between cities and citizens, as I mentioned in my previous. The cities have to have concrete tools, and especially the social network are a good way to communicate very quickly the information between cities to citizens. But the people during the climate crisis, they after that won't be closer. In my point of view, be closer together in concrete city, and they also knew and started the go to the nature and forest, and we have to also have the infrastructure around the city for the people who don't want to spend their holiday outside, but they want to live all day free time inside the city and around the city. Then I think we have to put some concrete point and to think and to say this point are the best, and we are going to invest only for this topic. What I'm saying, what I'm thinking, I think digitalization, artificial intelligence, environment problem with water, health issues, and aging are the top problem, and we have to invest in this area, especially with the strong capital, but not only the municipality capital, but the private capital also. And I think the private sectors is very important in one strong topic that we mentioned previously. It's the energy, because the cities itself, from my point of view, are not so strong to switch their energy without the commercial stakeholders. So I think the citizens, commerce sector, and non-profit sector have to cooperate together to switch to the non-carbon energy themselves.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that insight from your perspective. And then Mr. van Steen, your final statement and where you see the main opportunity in moving forward.
Yeah, thank you. I was happy to see the results of that poll. I think, though, we have to be careful that we do not underestimate the challenges as well. Going to climate neutrality, whether at a city level or at a country level or at the EU level, is a huge challenge. in normal circumstances, but also now in the new circumstances that we're facing with COVID. It is true that COVID also is the opportunity, and I think many people said that, it is an opportunity to rethink and to do things in different ways and better ways, also from a climate perspective. But we need to get that right, and that is going to be a challenge. It will require a lot of cooperation across sectors, and I think coming back to what we're doing within the EIP-SCC, it's exactly that type of initiatives that can bring those different sectors together and look at integrated solutions to all of this. So we in the Commission, when we're looking at this, of course, we come from an energy perspective from DG Energy, but we work very closely with our colleagues in DG Move from the transport side of things, but also with our colleagues in DG Connect so that we get all the digital aspects involved. And we now have 8 years of experience with this EIP. And of course, you can say that's not a lot, but it's still better than nothing. And I now think we need to move to the replication. We need to get this spread out to involve many more cities as far as possible. And I think that the COVID situation is a good opportunity to do exactly that. We've talked a lot about buildings. Buildings are critically important. It's not everything. I think we need to look also at renewables more broadly speaking, renewables, for example, in buildings, but not only. And we need to look at things like waste management, how to better integrate waste streams also in our energy management of the cities. There's an awful lot of opportunities there. And our colleague from the bank said the money is there. Yes, the money is there, but we need to make sure that when this money is actually being made available, it has to go into the right kind of projects. And that will be a challenge in itself. I can tell you that much, having experience with sort of money management. If we are to spend this money wisely in the very short period of time, this will require a lot of effort, not just from the Commission side, but also from the member states and the local levels that have to be involved in that. So I think there are many challenges ahead, but also many opportunities, and of course we should try and seize them as far as possible. I've gone a little bit overdue, but I thought those messages were quite important at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, and Mr. van Steen. And I mean, maybe just to add to that, and of course, as we say, the money needs to go to the right direction. I think we shouldn't underestimate the role of the EIP-SCC matchmaking. That can actually be a good tool or a wonderful tool to get the much needed investment for the smaller and medium-sized cities. So at this point, I want to thank our great panelists for their statements, for their interventions, for sharing their positions and views, but of course also you as the audience for your participation and active listening over the last hour and a half. I'm looking forward to the next plenary where we will take this more high-level policy discussion towards looking at practical implementation and specific actions in a number of selected cities. So I invite you to be back for that in plenary room number 2.